So I'll start now by saying good evening and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Yale Center Beijing event on good to great in the digital economy, membership economy, and successful business models in the US and China. Tonight, we're delighted to have two distinguished guests. The first is Robbie Kellman Baxter, who is the founder of Peninsula Strategies, a management consulting firm, as well as the author of the best-selling The Membership Economy, Find Your Super Users, Master the Forever Transaction, and Build Recurring Revenue, which is published as 会员经济 in China this year. She coined this popular business term and has been quoted and interviewed by many outlets, including CNN, NBC, and NPR. Her clients include Netflix, Microsoft, and the Wall Street Journal, and she has been focused on the subscription and membership models for the past 20 years. She earned her MBA from Stanford and her BA from Harvard. And I want to add a personal note that she is one of the first mentors I've ever had when I was an intern with her in my high school days. So I'm really delighted to welcome her to this venue, forum, whatever you call it. And I really look forward to hearing her insights. The other distinguished guest we have is our very own Professor Song Ma from the Yale School of Management and a faculty research fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Professor Ma's main interests are in corporate finance, entrepreneurial finance, innovation, industrial organization, and business law. His research has been featured in top academic journals and won numerous research awards. His research has also been frequently referenced by legislators around the world, including the Federal Trade Commission, EU Competition Commission, and the UK Competition and Markets Authority. He's been frequently quoted and interviewed on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and the like. And he was recognized as Poets and Quant's 40 under 40 Best Business School Professor in 2021. So without further ado, today's event, we will proceed as follows. First, we'll have Robbie speak a little bit about her book, which many of you have received a copy of, thanks to the generosity of the CITIC Press, which is the publisher of her book in Chinese. And then we'll have Professor Ma provide commentaries as well as share his latest cutting edge research on the internet and the digital economy. Afterwards, I'll ask each of them some questions and then open up the floor for Q&A with the audience. So without further ado, let's welcome Robbie Kellman Baxter.
Thank you so much, Carol. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm in Silicon Valley and wanted to start with a thank you to Carol and to the Yale Center of Beijing for inviting me to talk about my book, The Membership Economy, which was recently translated into simplified Chinese characters. I also want to thank Professor Song Ma for joining us. I'm just really eager to get into the discussion with Carol and Song and with all of you. But first, I'll share a little bit of background on my work as some food for thought and hopefully to ignite some questions and comments from all of you. I first started developing my ideas about the membership economy about 20 years ago. And let me define what I mean by membership economy and how I got this idea. So it was 20 years ago, I was a consultant. I was working with Netflix. At this time, Netflix had a business on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States and was filling in the middle pretty rapidly. They had recently gone public, but they were still very much an underdog and not well known. Their target audience was still, cutting edge people who knew how to use DVDs. very different from today. But what was the same, even at that time, was subscription pricing, focusing on doing one thing really well, which I would describe as delivering professionally created video content with cost certainty in the most efficient way possible. So no late fees. Everything cost one fixed price, and they delivered it in the mail. Which meant you didn't have to, I was a young mom. I didn't have to throw on my raincoat on in the dark night and go out into the street to go find a movie. And I always had three movies if I was up in the middle of the night with one of my kids. So it was really amazing. And the way that they were focused on the customer needs more than any product or process and willing to evolve and improve it was really impressive to me. And I fell in love with them first as a consumer, but then as a business person. And as I was falling in love with them, a lot of other people were too. And I started getting calls from people who wanted to be the Netflix of news or music or bicycles or dental hygiene products, you name it. Somebody was trying to be the Netflix of that space. And so I started to really try to think about what does it mean to be the Netflix of that space. And it's about a move from ownership to access, from transactional mindset to focusing on the relationship, from a one-time payment, a big one-time payment, to many smaller payments, from one-way communication where I expect you to listen to me because I'm using my loudspeaker, to not just two-way communication between the organization and the individual, but also multi-directional conversations under the brand umbrella. And when you put all of those things together, you get this painter's palette of new ways of designing business models. But at the heart of it is what I call a forever transaction. So a forever transaction is that moment when your customer takes off a consumer hat, puts on their member hat, and stops looking for alternatives. It's when they say, I trust your organization to solve an ongoing problem or help me achieve an ongoing goal. And I'm going to start with you every time I want to make progress on that. So an example here, it doesn't have to be subscriptions. And I think that's really important to note. An example of non-subscription, Apple hardware company, for many years, a lot of people will go into an Apple store and say, I need a computer. Tell me what computer to buy. Tell me what other ancillary accessories I need. They'll come back and they'll say, okay, now I need a phone. Tell me what phone to buy that will go with all these things I already bought from you. And Apple will tell them. And then they come back in and they say, tell me what kind of printer I should buy. And Apple says, we don't sell printers. And what's really interesting and where the forever promise and the forever transaction really come into play is that the person says, okay, well, maybe you don't sell printers. Tell me where I should buy one because I trust you and it's Apple first. So when you have that kind of forever transaction with a customer, when they turn into a member and start acting like they belong, that's really at the heart of this membership economy. And it gives you permission to charge subscription pricing, among other things. But what it really does is it allows you to have, predictable cash flow. It allows you to learn more about your customer's journey. It allows you to be disruption proof. In other words, the customer's not looking for alternatives, so it's harder for an alternative to sneak in. It justifies a much higher valuation in both the private venture markets and in the public markets. A more valuable company, which I'm sure Song is gonna talk about a little bit. And that's really what people want. They trust you, and that's what creates all the value. So that's what I'm really talking about today is how do you create this kind of relationship with your customers where they become members, and how do you find your own forever transaction? So we're seeing this, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I first wrote the book, I had to explain this to everybody, and most people didn't think it applied to them, to be totally honest. They'd say, that sounds like something a newspaper does, or that sounds something, my Yale club does that. My professional associations have memberships, but I sell cars or I sell software or I sell professional services. We don't do that. But now it's really changed how people shop. It's changed how we watch TV. It's changed how we work. This is a big one this year for sure. We're connecting over Zoom. But WeChat and LinkedIn are also really changing how people interact with each other, get work done. And even heavy equipment companies like Caterpillar have publicly announced that they're moving to subscription first models in the next 5 years. So a lot of organizations are really changing how they think. Membership is even changing how we eat with delivery service memberships, meal kit subscriptions, restaurants that offer special perks to members like free coffee, which is something that Burger King, Pret a Manger, Panera Bread have all done. This is a huge step forward from the more traditional loyalty programs, the points-based programs. It's all about a special experience for consumers who are actually committing to a formal, ongoing relationship. And finally, and especially during this past year, subscription and membership-based fun is everywhere. Once you start playing, the models are all designed to engage you, to expand their relationship with you, to connect you with your friends, and to keep you on the couch or on the Peloton seat for a long time. So I want to just give you a second to just absorb this, that subscriptions are everywhere. Memberships are everywhere. And when I wrote my book, I looked at all of these different organizations as well as many others. But you start to get the sense of just how many different kinds of businesses there are that are thinking about subscriptions and how many are using this membership construct. So what does it mean for you and for your organizations? There's good news and bad. The good news is it's never been easier to build a direct subscription relationship with the people you serve, to justify loyalty, to build a model that kind of brings people in and keeps them there. The bad news is people are overwhelmed, tired, mistrustful, too many subscriptions, too many memberships, too many passwords, subscription fatigue. So how do we win in this world? I think the first thing is by recognizing it. When I used to talk about subscriptions, I got blank stares. People didn't understand the power of subscription for driving these market valuations. But today, I don't have to explain it to anyone. Everyone wants it. The bigger challenge is how to do it and how to win in a world of subscription fatigue. So I want to quickly share some of the specific tactics you can use to optimize your organization for a forever transaction. And of course, I'm glad to go into any more detail on any of this with Song, with Carol, and with all of you. So starting at the center, you need to have product market fit. That means that you have the right product for the audience, and it has to fit in two ways. One is at the moment of acquisition. So people sign up for it so that they join. What is the moment that's going to drive them to join? What is the feature that drives them to join? But then equally important, what are the features and benefits that are going to make them stay, that are going to make a habit out of your offering? And if you don't have that, there's no point in looking at the other items, but let's go on for now. First one, subscription models are about more than just the pricing. The product needs to be designed for engagement and expansion, and the organization needs to be optimized for the customer journey. The next thing to look at is your funnel. In the membership economy, the moment of transaction is the starting line of the relationship and not the finish line. And this is important for your communication as well as for the metrics you choose to track. It's not enough to attract those customers. You have to keep them as well. I could talk about pricing for hours. It's a whole talk in and of itself, but a few things to keep in mind about pricing. If you want people to trust you, if you want them to relax into a relationship, you have to make it easy for the buyer to buy. They have to be able to trust your pricing. The more complicated your pricing, the more they have to remain an expert on your pricing model to get the right deal for themselves. So what I would say is the simpler the pricing, the easier it is for them to relax into the relationship. So I suggest limiting your tiers and limiting your add-ons to try to keep it as easy as possible. I also suggest considering the role of free, whether that's free trial, which is a taste of what you have to prove credibility and relevance, and that's really the only reason to have free trial. if people don't believe what you're saying or they don't understand what you're offering. If they believe you and they understand, there is no reason to give them a free trial. Freemium, on the other hand, is to change behaviors, to build a viral trend, or to create a network effect where the value of each free member is creating more value for each paying member. So think about free and think about its role in your model. Um, Onboarding is probably the single most overlooked and underutilized lever in the membership economy. It can be a real secret weapon for building a forever transaction. It's how you establish habits, establish expectations in those early seconds, minutes, or days after someone joins your organization that helps them know how to get the most value for what they're paying for and helps them understand how to get that value while they're still really excited about being part of your organization, about what they just bought. There's a half-life on enthusiasm, so you really want to invest in building habits at that initial moment of onboarding. You do want to keep it up on an ongoing basis. Customer success is an emerging and growing discipline, comes out of the software as a service world, but I believe it's just as important on the consumer side as a means of ensuring that after somebody's made a purchase, they get the value they're entitled to and they continue to expand and deepen their relationship with the organization. This is where you're focused on engagement metrics like recency, frequency, depth, and breadth of engagement. So, even if you don't have a team that's called your customer success team, really important to think about how you're ensuring that the customer is successful on an ongoing basis. And finally, if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that every organization is a technology organization. It's not okay for anyone in the organization to say, I don't do tech. It's like basic literacy. It's like saying, I'm going to choose not to read. I'm not going to read any of the memos because I'm not a reader. When I work with digital natives, I don't need to talk about this too much, but many companies, particularly the ones that have been around for a while and successful for a long time, news organizations, consumer products, durable goods, struggle to build a culture where everyone takes responsibility for the role technology can play in their functional areas. It's not just the content or the product that your members value, it's how it's delivered, how well you understand their needs, and how you guide them on their journey. And that requires UX design, data analytics, and an openness to new ways of delivering on the how of your value. So before closing, I just wanted to give you a reminder that this is about an ongoing journey. It's not just about the subscription pricing, the tactic. In fact, I know many organizations that I would consider part of the membership economy in China don't focus on subscription pricing, don't use that as a tactic, and that's fine. It's just one of many levers. But what's really at the heart of this forever transaction is to love your customers and their ongoing mission more than any specific product, any particular role that you have, or any particular process that you're already using. So with that, I will hand it back to Carol and over to Song.
Thanks, Robbie. And I do want to let audiences who are located in the US that know that Robbie actually has a new book out this year called The Forever Transaction, if you want to learn more about that. So thank you so much, Robbie. Now we'll have Song talk about his work and what he thinks about the membership economy and how it's working in the US and China.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank Carol and the Beijing Center for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to interact with Robbie on this very interesting new topic. And also, I do want to play advantage of my ability to speak Chinese and just to greet everybody in Chinese, 向大家问好. But I will just make sure the communication goes well. I'm just going to use English for my comments. So I learned quite a bit from the very short talk that Robbie gave, and instead of just giving my own thoughts on this, I want to provide maybe a few commentaries. Maybe this will help the audience to actually open some ideas, even for a few further discussion at the later part of the event. The first one is that I want to kind of draw attention on this cross-sectional variations of the readiness, availability of membership economy. What do I mean by that is that even though I think this is a global trend that people will move to a lot of more business models based on the membership economy, there are quite a bit of variations across different countries that is based on their cultural background, their readiness for being a member of a certain club because of the social trust that they have between an individual and an association. And there's also very huge differences across consumer behaviors. That is how much expectations I put on certain type of transactions, certain type of organizations, and how stable my taste is, and so on. I mean, I think people would imagine that the consumer or consumption activities between a Chinese consumer and the German consumer and the US consumer are quite different in terms of their expectations about what they want to get, and so on. And also there's also technicality availability, right? I mean, that is like especially if we actually want to look at the internet availability across different continents, across different countries, and so on. If membership economy were perpetuated by internet availability, then how should we think about that? And actually, this could be playing in favor of a lot of future business models if you actually think about, oh, what does this mean for where the future opportunities are? That is where perhaps all those availabilities and opportunities are not exhausted yet. And there are also sense of like the desired sense of community that is very different across different countries, right? Like in China, like where I grew up, the sense of community and so on is very family based. Right? I mean, that is my family is the first like gear of my community, and that is very important. But in the US, it's slightly different, and I think in some European countries it's very different, and so on. And this because if you are a member of a certain organization, you're essentially plugging yourself into a community to build that small community. And how do we think about that in the world, especially with the social media and so on? I think it's a very interesting issue. That's the first point basically I want to make, which is across country and across different locations and so on, there are a lot of potential variations that are very interesting. I think Robbie's book addressed some of them. I think this is something for all of us to think more. The second thing is actually I want to dial into this concept of forever transaction a little bit, specifically the term forever. That is, I was thinking, is that rational or is that actually good for a business to think that they're going to be there forever? Right? If you actually look at the recent survey from BBC and CNN and so on, they were looking at how long an organization really survived in the past 200 years and so on. And most of the very old firms that are still survived or are still alive at this moment are Japanese, like let's say knife makers or like furniture makers and so on. Organizations transact. I think this is what we learned from entrepreneurship, like from Joseph Schumpeter in the mid 20th century. Basically says the creative destruction is not stoppable. Some organizations will die, right, and some of the businesses will die as technology goes through and start to evolve and so on. Therefore, like I don't disagree with the term forever, but I do think there's a little bit of nuance in this forever. That is, I think there's nothing that is really forever except change itself, right? I mean, like we basically need to acknowledge that if you want to be a long-term business, it's very important to acknowledge that you're going to expand your business models, you're going to create new product, you're going to engage your consumers in a very different way across time. Maybe every 2 or 3 years, you need to totally reinvent yourself. In that way, it's a forever transaction, but perhaps every transaction across time is going to be very, very different, right? So I think it's important to put that nuance there, because I don't think Netflix would be able to perhaps stream videos in 50 years, because in some unforeseeable ways, perhaps we're going to change our way of entertaining ourselves after 8 p.m. And put the kids in the bed, right? Maybe they're going to become a member of something else, right? I mean, I think that's having that sense of foreverness is in the business world, perhaps is also useful. The third thing is also the last comments that I want to give is this: how should we think about the role of firms and business in the world with membership economy expense? Right? Basically, if you think about how business schools teaches students and teach future managers about managing your firms, what we have been teaching is like, okay, you need to manage your money this way. That is how finance and accounting works. You need to manage your capital, right? That is manage your supply chain. That is how operational research and finance people did, and how do we manage all those kind of investments, and so on and so forth. That is how we define the boundary of a firm. That is your physical capital, your plants, your all those stuff, right? We know the physical capital, even intangible capital, and so on. But I think as this membership economy start to actually take a very important role in the economy, we realize that the boundary of the firm includes your consumers, both in terms of like, or your customers, or your members in general, that is actually not part of this organization legally, right? Basically, if you bought a machine, you're going to be in charge of the machine. You're going to make your productive using those machines, and you own those machines, but you don't own your customers. Right? I mean, you start to think about the boundary of the firm start to be really blurry when you think about what firms really mean, right? And it becomes a very loose organization that is very different from how economists and business professors think about firms, let's say 50 years ago. I think having that in mind to think about what is the boundary of the firm, and now you manage the relation with those people who are not part of the organization, is actually very different, is very, very difficult. And I think with that in mind, I think a lot of the, you can call it tactics or strategies that Robbie shared towards the end of the presentation is very useful. I think it's useful to acknowledge that now as a firm, your main value adding, like for your firm, no longer come from those things that you own. Rather, is the relationship you need to maintain with people who is not part of the organization. With that in mind, I think the business education in terms of how to think about the value adding of management becomes very different. That's all I want to add. Thank you.
Song, thank you very much. That was really thought-provoking and kind of really puts an interesting perspective on Robbie's work and how entrepreneurship and companies work around the world. Robbie, I wanted to ask you something that I read in your book. You said you've talked to a venture capitalist who invests only in subscription businesses. And he said that what surprised him most about membership economy is that they have very different organization structures, staffing models, so on and so forth, which you've elaborated a lot in detail in your books. I'd be curious to know, what did this venture capitalist shared with you that surprised you? And kind of over time, how attractive is the membership economy business model to investors and consumers in general, kind of then compared to now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So much has changed even in the last, 5 or 10 years about how people feel about businesses that use subscription and about the role of subscription pricing, or as Song said, about how important it is to build, it is or it is not to build relationships with customers. So, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, when I would talk to most investors, it wasn't something that they looked at. And when you looked at most companies that even had subscription pricing, the person responsible for retention usually had a manager title or less, right? They were very low level in the organization, and their role was considered very tactical. And at the board meetings, what companies presented was new customers, new logos, new growth, and not very much thought was given to the lifetime value of a customer. And I think that's changed a lot. So what surprised me early on was, first of all, how uninterested a lot of investors were more generally in subscriptions, that it took me a while to find somebody that was focusing on that space. how that's changed over the last several years to the point where now, honestly, I get client requests from companies that say, we have to get some subscription revenue. So can you get us some? As opposed to saying, we're designing a business model that makes sense for our customers and for our shareholders. And, we think subscription's a key element of it. But it's kind of the tail wagging the dog where, and so I think what's surprising now is, sort of how narrowly people understand what it takes to be successful. And how, all the different roles need to change and how the metrics need to change. I think a lot of investors still don't really understand the underlying leading indicator metrics that indicate the health of a subscription-based business.
Fascinating. A quick follow-up question.
Oh, I don't hear you.
What do you think are the underlying, a quick follow-up question, what do you think are the underlying health metrics for a membership economy company?
Yeah, so I think certainly acquisition is important, but engagement, retention, expansion of the relationship is important. So when was the last time they engaged with their product? How often do they engage with your products and in what order? And how deep do they go when they use it? A lot of businesses have a metric, an onboarding metric about certain combinations of features that they want to see customers use right away that indicate that they're going to get value. So that's just a very different way of looking at it. And if I can, I wanted to respond to something that Song said about forever, because I thought that was a really good point. And it's something, honestly, that I struggle with too. I use forever metaphorically, right? It's a way of thinking. I think most organizations over-index in the other direction, which is, what are we going to do this quarter to hit our number? What am I going to do to get to my bonus? As opposed to, how do I invest in the long term? And it's also a really good lens to look at your relationships with your customers through, to say, what would I need to do to keep their engagement forever? If the promise is forever. So, Netflix has a forever promise that as long as you continue to enjoy professionally created video content, we'll continue to provide it in the, most efficient way possible and with cost certainty. So 15 years ago, that was 3 DVDs out at a time. Right now, then it was streaming. Then it was streaming of their own custom content. And, in 5 years, as Song indicated, it might be through holograms, right? It might be through, a live in-person experience. We don't know, but they're committed to professionally created entertainment, video in the most efficient way possible, with cost certainty. So, as long as they stay true to that, they might be able to keep those relationships in ways that, 95% of the Fortune 500 has not been able to do.
Robbie, that was so helpful for whether you're an investor or an entrepreneur or anyone thinking about starting a business. Thank you. And Song, I want to follow up on your very provocative comments because you did point to kind of the nuances of different economies, countries, cultures. And I really want to hear you elaborate on that. For example, what are the particular features of the Chinese economy that make companies built on this model easier or harder to thrive than those in the US? And in China, how do you think membership economy businesses are similar to or different from the ones we know about, such as Netflix or LinkedIn in the US?
This is really a good question. Also, is a very big question. So I'm going to try to kind of just pick a specific angle and then try to provide a few thoughts on this. So as I said, there are many cross-sectional variations across countries that could drive the business model very differently. And one thing the first thing I want to highlight is the level of social trust and trust to the business across different countries. And if you, even based on my life experience in China, and like when we think about numbers and so on, there are often some very unpleasant experience that we develop. For example, in hair salons, like this is actually one of the earlier examples that you would remember, like that is 15 years ago and so on. No matter which hair salon you go to, like just to get a haircut, like I don't have a complicated haircut to do, and in fact right now my wife does it and does a very good job. But what you often say is like, okay, how about become a member, become a member, become a member, we're going to give you or those kind of things, and so on and so forth. And then this hair salon perhaps would just go out of business um, very soon, and then you're going to not get your money and so on. There are also a lot of like Ponzi schemes and so on, like all those memberships associated with the early business models, like 15, 20 years ago, left those scar on a lot of Chinese consumers and so on, which actually destroys part of the trust between a consumer and the business, which it will take years to really recover, right? I feel like this is something that a lot of the Chinese membership economy business models are trying to really kind of overcome, right? Because even a lot of the a lot of renowned like very famous companies like Tencent and so on, their earlier membership services are also kind of drawing a lot of criticisms and so on, even though they also did some very good things as well. So basically all those kind of trust to business membership models that was actually like had a very rough start in the Chinese economy, I think is something I think it's particularly important to overcome for the new models when they develop. The second is that I think this is a bigger picture point, but I want to mention in two ways. And the specific thing I want to mention is about this changes of consumer taste and preferences. That is, I think if you think about why membership economy was very important, an important part of it is the desire for personalization and customization. Basically, I really want a community or a product really fits my identity, right? That is, that really fits who I am, how I think about business, and so on. I mean, that's why actually in the membership economy, you not only see a product, you see a type of thinking, right? You see a type of identity, either because I'm socially responsible, or I am really forward looking, I'm really environmental friendly, or or I'm actually having a certain diet habit and so on. All those things is about your identity. And as a result, like in a very fast changing pace of the economy in China, I think that's actually both an opportunity but a risk for businesses, right? Because consumers are actively searching their identity and searching the way that they want things to be personalized and customized for themselves. And what they like today might actually be very different from 2 years from now, and so on. Well, I feel like a lot of other economies, I think consumers are less active in doing that. I mean, I don't have really data to back me up on that, but assume there are differences that different countries, the consumers have different levels of change of their taste and their how active they are in terms of searching what they like and so on. I think that both poses opportunities as well as challenges to the Chinese market. I think I'm just going to stop here just to summarize. I think it's about the cultural background between business and consumers in a membership concept. The second, I think, is the consumer desire and habit of searching their personalized services and so on. Is another potential differences between different countries.
That was very interesting. Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, I'm already seeing a number of questions in the chat box. So I'm going to invite everyone who wants to post questions to post them in the chat box, and I'll read them off. Also, Robbie and Song, I don't know if you realize, we also have kind of a live streaming happening over WeChat with our 80,000 subscribers. We have more than 100 people on it. So I'm also going to ask 魏群学家要是腾讯直播那边有任何问题的话，烦请在这个 chat box 里面 输入，我会替他们提问。So Robbie, in short, I'm just gonna ask my team members to type any questions in the chat box from the WeChat live streaming. So first question is from Lionel. Hi, Robbie. In terms of the subscription model, what are some changes you're seeing nowadays? And what's the future like for that model? Looking forward to reading your new book. And I'm going to add a little bit to it, which is how COVID, how you think COVID has changed, some of what you're seeing in the membership economy. Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, so great question. Lots of change, and most of it is about where it's being used. And I think about that in two ways. So, I've noticed different markets, different industries have embraced the membership economy principles at different times. So, early on in my work, I told you, I'm based in Silicon Valley. Most of my early clients, Netflix, Intuit, Oracle, they were all, tech companies, digital natives, not a lot of baggage of other business models. From there, it went to a lot of media companies. I did a lot of work with, traditional media companies, news organizations, then professional societies, which have always had a membership model. And then slowly, consumer products, retail, hospitality, professional services. And now what we're seeing is, the combination of the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, machine learning, enabling durable goods, to subscribe to your refrigerator, to subscribe to your, thresher out in the fields, to gather data using sensors. I think that's one big change that I'm seeing. Second big change is the globalization of membership. As Song mentioned, cultures are very different. Acceptance and interest in these different models is very different. When I was first working with Netflix now a very long time ago, they actually tried to go to the UK and then came back because the market, there was too big a difference between what that market wanted and what Netflix was prepared to provide. And you flash forward to today, different models are going in all directions. So I think those are probably two of the biggest changes. The other one that I would say is this huge demand for recurring revenue that we're seeing, and this idea of owning the customer, which is which is quite controversial too, in terms of is that in the best interest of the customer? Is that but that is every kind of business, every kind of nonprofit, everybody is trying to figure this out, and it's not clear yet. There's some good that comes from it, but it's, I think not everybody agrees that it's the best approach.
Thanks, Robbie. The next question is from Simon, and although it's posed to Robbie, I actually think based on Song's work, because yeah,
I agree.
Because he studied antitrust law, I'll pose it to Song. So do you think creating a forever transaction business model would raise any antitrust, anti-monopolistic concerns, given recent government oversight and antitrust enforcement? That's a sharp one. Song?
Yeah, I think if you look at the global trend, this is definitely something I think over the world, across all antitrust agencies that I talk to, this is a major concern, which is sometimes they phrase this as the platform antitrust. In some sense, there are several new forms that it was making this very different from what we had before, right? That, for example, the collection of consumer data and the possible use of it. And because we know innovation and data economy has this feature of what we call the winner takes all, and this kind of features, which is really kind of driving this kind of concerns. The second thing is about the opaqueness of the business organization, which is we actually don't know what those businesses know, right? Basically, there's no regulation of what you cannot collect and what you cannot use, and so on. This is just a global issue that is not specific to China. That is, they're in the UK, they're in the US, they're in like the whole European countries, and so on. And then the third thing that is actually very related to my work, which is also something that is the recent enforcement was actually mainly based on, which is about this kind of acquisitions that is very different from how we thought about acquisitions in the last generation of antitrust. In the last generation of antitrust enforcement, when we think about it, it's more like, oh, you have two companies who are selling exactly the same TV, and then we're going to combine and then charge a higher price, which is kind of the price-based kind of behavior. But the new type of like acquisitions that could occur competition happens much earlier, and when even some of the business don't have a lot of consumer, but they had the potential, and also it happens like in a way that could avoid antitrust scrutiny, right? Like this, like there's a recent paper like not my own, but it's often quoted together from a professor from Chicago Booth. It's called stealth mergers. In China, is called 隐形重组. It basically means that you can basically do some things that is like not flying. It's kind of flying under the radar of the antitrust scrutinies. Therefore, I think it's a major concern. So just to flip the coin a little bit to ask, do we have the answer to it? The answer is, I don't think we do. I mean, I think like we don't know what would be the optimal policy at this moment yet, because there's always a trade-off of the protection of consumers as well as the productivity of the economy. I mean, there's all those kind of concerns. I think it's a lot of discussion that is happening extremely actively. I would say like in a couple of years, once we gather more information about what firms do and how they do things, and what governments can do to protect consumers and so on, I think it's like the answer to the how would be much more clear. Right now, it's more like we're trying to find the problems, and then we try to find the solutions going forward.
Great, thank you. The next question is probably for both of you. Amazon and from Henry Chan, Amazon and Costco. How did these two companies fit into the membership economy? And I think for Song, I will add in folks like JD, Ali, and now Sam's and Costco opening up in China. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll start and then pass it over to Song. So, I think these are two really interesting models of what I would call a premium loyalty program, and that's the approach that they're taking to the membership economy. So if you take a step back and say, what are they trying to do? They're trying to commit to a forever promise with their customers, to build a long-term relationship that is known, and to get that customer to prefer shopping there, to make it a habit. Which I certainly have to admit. What's interesting to note, with Costco, that promise is we'll have the lowest priced, interesting offerings. You can only access them if you're a member. So you can't even walk into a Costco store in the United States or you can't buy anything if you're not a member. You don't pay your $60 a year. Whereas with Amazon, they have more of a hybrid model. You can shop there without being a member of Prime. But if you're a member of Prime, you get a much better experience. And it's very apparent that the entire experience is optimized for Prime members. And, early on, the only real benefit of Prime was 2-day free shipping, but they've layered in benefits over time to continue to stay relevant. And I think this kind of also goes back to, what you were saying earlier, Song, about how consumer needs change, markets change, and a lot of businesses don't change with them. I think Amazon does a nice job of demonstrating how they've continued to evolve to deliver on that promise of making it the easiest place, the most friction-free place for consumers to shop.
Okay, I mean, I think that's a very interesting question about the differences across all those different things. I think Robbie actually has a much better understanding than I do in those kind of nuances. I think it's always, I mean, I guess I'm just using a very polite way to admit that I don't have a good answer, but I have I have in fact, I feel like a deeper, like another way for me to think about this question is like why some of them has an easier time in globalization and some of them has a harder time in terms of globalization. I think that's also kind of what puzzles me quite a bit in terms of some of the models can be adapted, for example, to China's fairly more easily, and some of them less so. And like the level of local knowledge, how important is it? And so on. I think all those things could matter. And but just to throw one thing as a food of thought is this is this thing about the need for facing consumers in real time, which is like if you think about Amazon, JD, and so on and so forth, they are mainly online. For Costco, on the other hand, there's a lot of interactions with people, like in the real time, like in the store, and so on and so forth. Like I think one like this could be one differences among them in terms of how they can use different ways to engage their members, right? Because if you look at Costco and so on, they actually give you free food. They're going to smile at you. They're going to do all kinds of things. They actually give you very cheap pizza and so on, and so on. I think all those things could matter as well as a way of engaging and reading their customers and so on. Yeah.
Fascinating. I'm gonna cherry pick a little bit from the questions because we have limited time left. This is for Robbie. Um, it's a general question about what are the success factors for membership economy businesses these days, and a second question about it's basically about how staffing is different for membership businesses. So, for example, for warehouse membership business, would the purchasing managers actually become product managers to improve the SKU and product layout to attract customers? So kind of pointing to a lot of things you discuss in your book.
Yeah, these are great and hard questions. I think, you know, in terms of new jobs, there are both new skills that are required, and there's also different lenses that organizations need to look through. So, for example, when you talk about purchasing managers, you know, a lot of times the purchasing managers, you know, I buy cereal or I buy, you know, batteries. And while that is still important to have the right assortment, what really becomes important is the experience of the consumer. What are they coming in for? Where are they going next? It's not enough to just have your siloed different product lines, but you also need to think about the member journey through the experience, both at each, you know, each time they shop, as well as what gets them back in the store. And sometimes the purchasing people need to make decisions to get people back into the store rather than just maximizing their own profitability. And that is kind of at the heart of what is different. There's a lot of kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration required for the new metrics for engagement and for retention. And I see it a lot, not just in retail, but another example might be learning organizations. So, you know, historically you have content, you have a class here, you have a class here, you have a class here. But the question is, how do I get them to come back and take all the lessons? And how do I get them to go from this course to the next course to create impact in their work, for example, so professional development as an example. And so suddenly organizations need to have not just expertise in the content itself, but in the delivery and in the journey. So what part is online, what part is in person, and how do we get them, how do we work with them in between the times that they're actively engaged in a class? So those are some of the changes that I see. And you see them in almost every kind of business.
That is so interesting. Thank you. And for Song, this is a very China specific question. Jia Zhao said, I noticed that in China, WeChat has really taken a huge share of people's lives. Recently, there's discussion about private pools, 私域 in Chinese, which are converting one-off consuming behaviors into recurring buying decisions in WeChat groups. Do you think this is also happening in the US or in a different way in the US?
I mean, this is a very specific question, I guess. I tend not to comment on things that I don't know very well. So therefore, like what I'm going to make a comment on is no more than, or like basically it's more of a personal speculation than anything else. I guess it's a bit about it's really about, let's say, about how to use data to actually personalize your recommendations and to really extract the biggest benefit without bothering other people. I feel like that's how we understand it, right? I mean, then it has the common pros and cons, which is the pro would be things will be more personalized, right? I mean, that's actually what people are aiming for. You're having a small group of people who are basically really kind of engaged in certain type of activities or consumer behaviors and so on. Then you are going to really kind of dig deeper into it and get the more satisfaction out of it. For example, if you have a group about skiing, you have a group about skateboarding and or those things, right? I mean, this could be or possible, but in the end, it's about whether you're going to use the data to do anything evil. That's not necessarily to be the best. I mean, it's very hard to think that the like it's very hard to know basically whether they're doing all those things, and it's even harder to identify those kind of activities. Regarding whether this kind of things are kind of more prevalent in other countries, my understanding would be the answer is likely yes. Like I think if you think about all those influencer models like in both China, US, and among other countries and so on, it's kind of a very similar concept, I would say. And yeah, that's how I think about it as a way from a business model perspective. But I perhaps need to dig deeper into the specifics to have more specific answers.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up to the end of the talk, and actually, Robbie, with your permission, I'm sure there are a lot of follow-up questions, and may I just put the web address you put in your bio to share in the chat box so people can reach out with any comments or additional questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll do that. With this, I would like to invite, this is a tradition at all Yale Center Beijing Zoom events. We try to ask as many people here to turn on your cameras so that we can all say thank you to our wonderful speakers, Robbie Baxter and Robbie Kellman Baxter and Sangma, to thank them and to say hi to everybody. So I would like to ask more of you to turn on your cameras.
What a nice tradition. I love it.
And we'll try to unmute as many of you as possible very quickly. And we'll take a group shot and say thank you. And you can say thank you in Chinese or English, or give us an applause, whatever you like. So I will count down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you especially to Robbie and Song for your wonderful talk and sharing. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a good morning or evening.